Welcome back to the Fraud Files. I'm Paula Kioki, CEO of OMI. My guest, as always, is Dr. Augustine Fou, the researcher who has spent more time than almost anyone alive staring at the gap between what the dashboards say and what actually happens. Dr. Fou, today I want to get into the light versus the dark in this system, the measurement tools we think are showing us reality and why they may not be. Let's start with attribution. I think this is where a lot of marketers feel more confident. They see the conversion path. They see that they touched the customer before they bought. Walk me through why that picture can be so misleading.
All right, let me spend a second on describing view-through conversions for the audience if they're not familiar with that. So view-through conversions was something that Google created many years ago when they bought DoubleClick and started getting into the display ad business, right? So prior to that, Google was very focused on search ads, which were paid on a cost per click basis. And the search ads were getting a lot of the credit, almost all of the credit for driving sales, because it typically happens that the search ad was the last click before the person actually bought something. If you just think about your own human habits, you might see something on a TV ad, and then you go immediately and search it up online just to look up that particular car brand or almond milk or something like that. And then when you click through, that ad was the last thing you clicked before you bought something. Okay, so last click attribution gave a lot of credit for search ads. So then when they had to justify pouring more budget into display, they needed a new model to give credit to the display ads because they were saying, well, display ad must have helped in causing that sale, right? They must have driven the awareness and gotten the customer to think about the product and then ultimately gotten to the sale. So display ads deserve some credit. So then they created this mechanism or this methodology of measurement called view-through conversions. And put simply, if the person or the device was exposed to the ad, if a conversion happened in the next 30, 60, or 90 days, they would attribute that conversion back to that single display ad. And the way they would do that, the mechanism they would use is set a cookie. So when the ad loads, they would set a cookie. And if that person with that cookie ultimately converted in that time period, right, the conversion window, 30, 60, or 90 days, they would attribute that conversion to that view through, right, the ad, even if the ad were not clicked, right? Because a lot of times the display ad shows you the brand, but the person doesn't click on it, but it drove brand awareness. So that was kind of the
Okay.
theory. Now, the problem with that is what I'm going to call over claiming, right? They're claiming credit for too many of the conversions. So, for example, if there's a conversion that happened, 30, 60, or 90 days later, that was not actually caused by the display ad, they would still claim credit for it, right? So the problem with this model or the widely accepted way of measuring conversions or attributing conversions is flawed, right? So
Really?
now, the platforms that use that are over-claiming credit. But the easy way to check that that's happening is that if you actually add together the number of conversions that platforms claim, so I'm just going to use Google as an example, right? Google's going to claim a certain number of conversions in this first quarter. Facebook is going to claim a certain number of conversions in the first quarter, the same time period, right? And then maybe TikTok and maybe YouTube. If you add those all up, you might get 4 times the actual number of sales that you actually had on your books, right? Because each of those platforms are claiming credit for the same sale. Okay. So if that is what you're seeing, right? If there are way, way too many sales claimed, then you know that phenomenon is happening. And that's the problem with the way attribution is being done currently. Those are all sales that had already occurred, and the platforms are just separately claiming credit for it, and they didn't actually cause those sales.
That's big skewing. I mean, if you've got,
Yeah,
four potentially or however many claiming,
that's
your
for the
numbers are
same
just,
sale. Yes, exactly.
your numbers are all wrong.
Yes. And that's why the marketers think everything's working so well, right? We're getting so many sales from this. Let's keep pouring more money into it. If they actually
But they're
saw
not.
what was truly incremental, right? Those sales that would not have happened in the absence of the advertising, right? If they actually got incremental sales, then their company would have grown significantly, right? And they could then say, okay, yes, let's pour more money into the channels that are working.
So let's talk about the metrics themselves: CTRs, viewability scores, engagement rates. These numbers get thrown around constantly, a proof that a campaign worked. How reliable are they as proxies for real performance?
Um, I think they're good interim metrics, and they've been useful directionally. So, like most things in ad tech and digital advertising, what may have started off as a good idea, in reality, it may not be as useful or as functional as you think. Okay, so let's take clicks for example. A lot of marketers will say more clicks are better because, for example, when you're doing search ads, a higher click-through rate meant the ad resonated more, the message worked, and they actually wanted to click through, right? So in the very beginning, that made total sense. But now, if you start to layer in other things like ad fraud or bots that click on your ads, right? Some of those clicks are not real to begin with. Now, there's also the problem of algorithms optimizing your media spend. Okay, so the algorithms have to have an input signal, and typically that's like clicks. Those are easy to measure. So more clicks or higher click-through rates would be a great signal for the algorithm to think that something's working well and therefore allocate more budget to that. So you can see where that goes wrong when you take into account fraud. The bots will click more than humans. So then on the fraudulent sites, the ads would get more clicks and higher click through rates. So then to the algorithm, it said, oh, things are working way better over here. Let's allocate more budget to the bad guys. Okay, so you see
Mhm.
how when you're using a metric like clicks,
Mhm.
that's easy to measure, the algorithms can easily help you amplify the mistakes, right? The clicks weren't actually driving real sales for you. They just made the ads look like they were performing better. Okay, so a
Mhm.
lot of that has been happening over the past 15 years. And so whatever the metric, whether it's viewability of many years ago, it's like, oh yeah, there's more viewable ads over here than not. Okay, well, you didn't take into account that the bad guys were simply faking the viewability, right?
Mhm.
Every fake site had 100% viewability 100% of the time. So, because it was all faked, right? So, if
Right.
your algorithm is optimizing for viewability, you're going to accidentally send more money to the bad guys, right?
Mhm.
And so I've seen all of that happen. So ultimately, the marketer, the responsible marketer or the mature marketer will be one that kind of looks past the vanity metrics, right? Higher sports scores are great, but you got to look beyond that if you're actually trying to do real marketing. So for the mature marketer, it's like, okay, yes, start with those metrics, but make sure you're not getting tricked or you're not getting duped into overspending on channels that have lots and lots of fraud. And it's because the bots are clicking on it. That's why you're seeing a higher click through rate, right? You still have to match that with the sales that you're actually getting. And if you do so, there's a good way of doing digital marketing where you're not getting ripped off.
It's a maze to wind your way through. So um, there's also an agency dynamic here. Agencies are often compensated on media spend. We both know that, and hitting those benchmark metrics. So there's a structural disincentive to dig into where the numbers are real, and that's the challenge in the
Exactly.
market.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, until the CFO shows up.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way those relationships are set up, it's like the agency. I keep hearing from agency people, "Oh, we have to spend in full, or we're pacing behind. We're not going to be able to spend all the budget in the time frame we're given." Right? So that's their greatest fear. And for the marketers, that should actually be something they don't want to hear, right? You don't want your agency spending all your money as fast as possible, just for
Mhm.
the purpose of spending all your money. You got to make sure
But
that,
they want to.
yeah, but they want to, right? So I mean, ultimately, I think there's a lot of these structural constraints or structural incentives that are hard to solve. But you have to. So again, it's hard to solve it for the entire industry because there are many parties that want to resist the change. But if
I
you
think it starts with
care,
the client. I think it
yeah,
starts with the
it
client.
ultimately starts with the client. It's your money, right? You're
Yeah, they
paying the
push
budget.
back.
Yes, you have to push back. I'm
Mhm.
surprised over the years when I hear clients say, "Oh, well, we can't do that," or we even the advertisers themselves is like, "Oh, we do have to spend it all because if we don't spend it all, we're not going to get as much budget next year." So I said, well, if you can actually spend the money and let it fall through to your bottom line, isn't that better, right? Especially in categories like CPG where the overall company margin is 1%. If you can save some money and let it flow straight through to the bottom line, It's much better than you trying to spend it all in marketing and not even generate that 1% lift in your
Right.
bottom line for your company. So a lot of these things are just literally backwards thinking. But again, there's so much misinformation perpetuated, by the vendors that have something to sell. That's been part of the problem. So I think marketers need to break through all that noise and try to again focus on their own sales and outcomes.
Dr. Vid, I had years ago somebody at one of the largest identity resolution companies, um, for serving the ads tell me most of the media buyers are fresh out of college, that the team goes in and gets the account, the big team, and then they give it to somebody, fresh out of school, and they're just trying to get the budget off their desk because most of them are overworked anyway. So
Yeah,
it's like,
I can corroborate that. I mean, this was more than 20 years ago when I was working at American Express. On day two, when Digitas, the agency, came in, I said, we need to fire them. They don't know what they're doing. They brought 18 people to the meeting. They were all literally 22, 23-year-olds. I said, you don't need 18 people in this meeting. You only need one who actually knows what. But then I was told, oh, well, that's not your call. It's the CEO of American Express. You can't fire the agency. So
uh,
that's one. And then when I was actually working at the agency, I can also corroborate that, we were the senior management team. We went in and won the project. The moment we won it, we gave it to the 22-year-olds to execute.
okay,
So on the
okay,
flip side, if I'm on the client side, the procurement people should write in the names. These are the people who have the expertise. They're pitching us. We need them to work on the project, not hand it over to a 20-year-old. So all those things are just kind of not talked about, but happens all the time. So again, we can't solve it for the industry because this has been the way it's been done for years and years. It really is up to the marketer to wake
yep,
up and ask harder questions and be kind of better stewards of your own budget because no one else is going to help you with that.
yep, that's for sure. And I know we really don't want people to feel defeated in this conversation. Is there anything else regarding measurement you think that they should be looking at in your view?
Yeah, so let me give you just one more story, and this has to do with Google Analytics, and it's just to illustrate kind of maybe think different, think opposite. So there's something that a lot of people use, like time on site, and
Yeah.
they would say if someone spends more time on your site, that tells you they're more interested. But let me offer a counter argument to that. They might be spending more time on your site because they couldn't find what they were looking for, right? Something as simple as that, right? Or if your site worked really well and they found the answer right away, they could leave in 2 seconds because they already found the answer. So, just thinking about it in one way, like greater time on site doesn't necessarily mean always a good thing, right? Less time on site means they found the answer and moved on. That's great, right? So
Yeah.
I would
I
encourage
hadn't really thought
marketers.
about that, but I think you're right because
Right. So, I mean, these are kinds of things I've seen over the past 30 years of doing digital marketing and looking at digital analytics. But a lot of marketers and even CMOs might be too young to have heard these stories or seen it themselves. So, the point I'm trying to make is that always kind of ask harder questions. Don't just assume that you have to think the way the industry tells you to think, because ultimately you got to look at your own sales, see whether the metrics are supporting that. And, even if you got large numbers of clicks, large numbers of attribution, right? We're talking about attribution fraud and ROAS fraud and all that kind of stuff. Um, if you don't have the actual sales to back it up, if the numbers don't jive, there's something wrong. Ask harder questions. So I think as a scientist, I always look for corroboration. So a technique I can share is like when I see something in the news, I probably would take a few of those keywords and Google it and see if any other news outlet had reported on the same thing. If
okay.
I can find at least one other, then I can, believe some of that. So I would say for marketers, really look for corroboration, whether it's your own internal reporting. Don't just take the platform's reporting at face value. It's not that they're deliberately trying to rip you off. There just could be errors, and it's also just not set up to favor you. So the only person that's got to look out for you is you, right? And your own budgets and your own outcomes. So
I,
that's what
I,
I would leave as a takeaway message.
I think that's universal in life, period, right? You got to look
Yeah.
out for yourself. So this was great. This is our episode 2 with Dr. Food and the fraud files. This was great information, and we'll see you all in episode 3.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.